Welcome to Queued Up with Ziz and Pam, part 2 with Dr. I. There's so much to cover, so we're going to dive right in and talk about a myriad of things, but let's do a quick recap. So, Dr. I love the fact of how you presented the part 1, part 2, part 3. So if I understand it correctly, we want to start with meaning. Who are you? What are your strengths? If a parent is asking those questions, and I loved how you talked about in the first segment, listening, which is a really difficult thing for all of us. In the past segment, Pam and I talked about that, and we use examples from our own lives with our own children, so on and so forth. But just yesterday, I was talking to students in the summer school, and one of the students asked the question, how can I get my parents to listen to me? I mean, that's just heartbreaking. So anyway, going back to the recap. So what are they good at? What are they passionate? What are they passionate about? So that'd be one. Number two, a child's interest. I mean, you're saying things that are really complicated, right? This isn't really complicated. And then three, the learning process, making it fun. And all of a sudden you're having to tell your son to take a break because he's learning. I mean, that's awesome. That's what I would imagine most parents would want. So did I miss anything in that process?
No, that's a perfect summary. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, the other part to this is, I mean, we were talking off air and you were talking about the heart, like starting with the heart. So why don't you, tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think a good education experience involves the mind, the hand, and the heart, right? And oftentimes we think that, and to educate a kid, we only need to work on their mind, their brain. They need to learn this. They need to memorize that. They need to remember this. I mean, that's important, but that's only part of the picture. The bigger part, I feel like, is to inspire the heart. And we are in today's information economy, right? So if their heart is ready, if they want to learn something, they can easily go online to figure this out. I have worked with enough students who are like, they're interested in learning more about fashion. They will launch a podcast, they will do research. My 8-year-old is interested in learning more about selling. So he has been watching online videos. He's interested in drawing. He has been watching all those YouTube superstars, learning about drawing. Like, I think the missing picture, the missing piece is the heart, because most children's heart is asleep, it's numb, it's asleep, right? So they are not interested in getting up. They are not interested in going to school. A few days ago, I had a conversation with a high schooler in Boston. I was like, wow, how do you feel about going to school or like remote learning? She was like, I don't enjoy it. And then I asked her, how about other people? She told me nobody enjoyed going to school. Nobody enjoyed watching their Google Classroom online class. It's not interactive at all. And so like, if the heart is ready, and then this high schooler that I had a conversation with, that she's really into Model UN. So she has been organizing, and she's coming to my show in October. So she has been organizing like Zoom meetings, doing Model UN. And she's like, I love this. I'm learning so much. Whereas in my traditional classes, I'm actually not learning that much. It is so boring. I'm not interested. So I think if parents, going back to listening, can really spend more time, and even educators understand their children, what are they interested in, and start from the heart, and then think about the curriculum. Not just, hey, this is a standardized curriculum. No child is standardized. Then why do we use a standardized curriculum? Every kid is different. And so if we can start from here.
That is awesome. And of course, speaks my language with Viktor Frankl. I think a lot of it though is you have to explore. And when we consume every hour of their day with content, which is largely outdated, largely, and also the way we teach it. I'm taking Joe Bowler's course from UCube at Stanford. It's called 21st Century Learning and Teaching, about the neuroscience of the brain and making mistakes, how your brain fires and grows. And every day you wake up with a new brain that has been exposed to different things. So if we have our kids sitting in front of a screen absorbing content, they're not able to explore and discover. I mean, through my kids, my oldest one, well, they all volunteered a lot, but she discovered her passion for special needs kids volunteering. And now she was an average student. Not one of my children was a straight A student, because they were busy. We didn't value a lot of that stuff. We valued what were they doing in the community? Were they at the dinner table discussing we discussed everything at our dinner table, explored all these kind of concepts. But anyway, so when she hit college, she knew what she wanted to do, and she graduated with honors. We're like, what? Who's this kid? I mean, you need the hook,
exactly.
you know? And same thing with my youngest, when I challenged her to figure out what she was going to do if her college went online, and she just said, I just want to learn to sew. And she's never had any interest. Well, now, oh my gosh, she's in her zone sewing for hours, designing things with no pattern. I'm like, don't you need a pattern? Oh no. And she is loving it. She is learning on YouTube, and she's learning all these things, and to see your child so inspired. And then the same thing with my middle daughter, Rachel, you know, so inspired for screenwriting and that, you know, entrepreneurship and different things that she's interested in. And wow, when they can discover who they are and how they fit in the world and what they want to do, as we have, each of us have when we align with our mission and our meaning, boom, 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 everything just suddenly comes in.
Well, the point that and it's dynamic, so it's changing. So it's been so fun to watch you both. I get inspired by watching you both because I've been learning from you. So the articles, you know, we were just talking about, so Dr. Ai used to film in her little room in South Korea. And the fact that she wasn't afraid to make a mistake. So, you know, the learning process, you know, so let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's tell parents, what is the learning process? For me, and I'll just really quick football or sports analogy, the way you learn, especially in sports, is by making that mistake. You drop a pass, you're like, okay, that didn't work, let me do it better. And you just do it over and over again. So it's like, get back up faster to practice again.
Totally. Yeah. Like I love, you know, like at my school, and I'm also an advocate of project-based learning. So everything is through a project. And one of my favorite learning model is 70-20-10. So what that model describes is like, you know, for any transformation to happen, only 10% comes from reading a book, taking a class. You know, I don't even remember. There's so many books I read. I only retain very little information, right? Yeah, unless if I practice this, I make a few mistakes. And then, you know, 10% is from formal learning, and 20% is what we're doing here right now, having a conversation, peer-to-peer, working with the coach, the social atmosphere of learning, and 70% is experiential learning, real life project. That's why I invited those people from Singapore to actually practice communication, you know, to practice collaboration, to practice adaptability. The fact that we have to change our class time, that's wow, people in different countries have different time zones. When I was teaching at my school in New Jersey, like my students, they don't even know there's like PST. They're like, wow, there are different time zones. Like they just couldn't comprehend that. But now we're like working with people in different countries. They are 12 hours for people on the West Coast. It is like 16 hours ahead of them. So like, wow, you know, you will see that how amazing. To me, that is the true power of technology, to collapse time and space, to create a learning community where we can collaborate. And this is so much more powerful that I don't see many teachers are actually using this. They only use technology to deliver content. I mean, you can do that, but that is only, to me, the 20%. 80% is to do what you can't do through the traditional face-to-face classes.
Well, and I think it was interesting too. I mean, the reason, well, one of the values of college was bringing different perspectives together and have the discourse and discussions about whatever subjects were from different perspectives. And I think we have lost that because in the busyness of the content and the grades and the stress and the anxiety, and as well as the fact that we don't have teachers who have time to take that nurturing role, because 60 to 70% are adjunct, and the ones who are tenured are publishing, researching, doing all that. So who's watching the undergraduate shop? So what you're talking about as a model, because it was interesting, Rachel's perspective on this was she had to also understand culturally that her partner had a different, much more regimented way of approaching things based on what they had been taught. You know, it's kind of like now when I have friends who are attorneys, they're like telling some of their associate attorneys to go do something. They're like, well, how many paragraphs do you want? And so I think the interesting thing for her was someone who was much more, this is what we have to, you know, whatever. Rachel's more free. She's an artist, creative, free flowing. Well, no, this all comes together. This seems so easy to her, a different approach, culturally very different.
100%, 100%,
So
exactly.
not only
exactly.
that, but also that you're working with somebody who has a different sort of cultural value system,
Exactly.
different approach, different training.
A different educational environment, yeah.
Exactly, and that to make it work, you have to respect that, accept it, and go on.
That's true collaboration. That's true collaboration. I wish, you know, I took so many classes in communication. The only thing we did was to memorize, you know, the essential elements of verbal communication. Now, I can memorize all of those things, but I never learned, you know, how to actually do this in real life. And I noticed quite a few of my undergraduate students, and this was when I was still giving people exams, but later I stopped doing that. They scored perfectly on a quiz, but in real life, they have no idea how to even talk to their neighbors, like in the same class, not even people in a different state, in a different country, but they can't even talk to their friends. So, wow, you scored 100 on this quiz, but here you are. I was like, wow, what a role model that I had been using. So that was actually an aha moment. Yeah, I love, you know, when Duncan Wardle came to my show, he said, diversity is innovation. And to me, that is so powerful. I interpret diversity not only in terms of skin color, but also in terms of our educational background. We come from different walks in life, right? Like my program right now, we have children like Rachel into like creative writing. We also have kids into education and people into fitness, very different. And when you are in that diverse background, you will start being challenged, you know, your assumptions. People will ask you questions that you take for granted. You're like, oh, really? That is actually a question, because each of us has been in our own river of thinking. And for so long, we stop asking those take for granted questions, right? But I think if we want to innovate, we have to look at those assumptions. So I really love that, you know, when you have people from different countries, from different background, from different educational background to challenge you and to have a conversation with you, to collaborate with you, that's the very first step to deconstruction and reconstruction.
And I think too, when we're talking about learning, people think, oh, if you take a test, you've learned it. And of course, all the studies are showing, you know, people who score perfectly on AP 6 months later completely fail it because it went into short-term memory and out, because learning requires, number one, interest. You only learn what you're interested in. 2, relationship. It's a contextual experience when you learn. And number 3, safety. You have to feel like you belong, and also physically, for a lot of kids, unfortunately, that they're safe and whatever. So if you don't have those 3 components, it's not learning. Absorbing content is not learning, you know? And so I think parents are like, we've been sort of trained to check the boxes, right? That if my kid does this, gets a straight A, and you can talk about this, I'm excited about it, is what's the relationship between GPA and innovation and entrepreneurship in our new environment?
Yeah,
you know, parents
totally,
love to say, the other day just said, oh, my child struggles, depressed, but she's straight A student. And that means she's okay.
Like a badge of honor, right? Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
And it's the goal, but.
Well, I tell parents, GPA is actually inversely related to innovation. In other words, the higher the GPA, the more obsessed the children are with their academic performance, the less likely they are to innovate. It makes so much sense. You know, there's another book, A students work for C students, and B students work for the government. I see that in my students all the time. A students, very predictable. Like I give talks to high schoolers all the time. Just a few weeks ago, I gave a talk to a group of high schoolers. Like, what do you guys want to do? Lawyer, doctor, medical doctor, very predictable. Those are like straight A students, very predictable. I was like, wow. And then the C students are more like into entrepreneurship and starting something new. And they are not afraid of being different. Whereas the A students, when they don't fit in, and they feel uncomfortable. But the C students, they are used to outside the box, and that's why I call us disruptive learner. And traditional disruptive is kind of negative connotation, but I love students who are disruptive because they are more innovative. They own their opinions. They feel good about who they are. And to me, that is really important. If we want our children to become innovators, to become disruptive leaders, the traditional GPA is not a good benchmark. It is a good benchmark for how obedient you are, how predictable your career is, but not so good in terms of innovation, creativity, and thinking outside the box.
So with that being said, it's interesting you say that, because someone like Gary Vee, or Gary Vaynerchuk for all the listeners, he said he was a DF student. And the only time that mattered is when his report card came home and his mom was like, okay, he may have been punished for a smidgen of time, like 15 minutes, but when he was selling at the lemonade stand or trading his cards or doing any of those things, he had unbelievable people skills and selling skills. And those are things that we don't talk enough about. They are actual skills. And I think for students, if we actually say to them, we tell them, like, communication, I mean, that's your expertise. I mean, that's what I studied as an undergraduate student, listener, sender, receiver, but there's so many components to that. It's being able to break down the conversation and make sure they understand what's being said, asking a question to clarify. So
totally. And even I want to go back to talking about students. On my show, I interview quite a few young children, and like none of them is actually a straight A student. In fact, they get by like minimum, like as long as they don't have to drop out, and they will actually save the time to work on their business. Brendan Agronoff, and he was not like a straight A student, but he started his business when he was 13 and grew that into a 7-figure business. By the time he was 17, amazing story. Sean Kelly, who is a digital mentor at my school, and he wanted to get into business school, but his GPA was way too low, 1.9, and he couldn't pass a pre-calculus class. But guess what he did? He started a business, and that business happened to be very successful. He grew that into a 7-figure business by the time he was only 22. And here's the kid who couldn't get into business school because of his low GPA. But look at him today. He had a conversation with my students a few weeks ago, and just the last several months within COVID, he made 18 million.
Oh, jeez.
Incredible, right? This is like a kid who couldn't get into business school, but if I were his professor, I would be slapping my own face, right?
Well, you hear that so much. I mean, look at the founders of FedEx. I mean, he wrote a paper about the whole model, and they're like, no, this is terrible, gotta see, whatever. And look at it today. I will say the other thing, because I do want to talk about the concept and give grace to parents, that our world has changed so fast and dramatically that it isn't just this little shift in an evolutionary period. We, in the past 15 years, because of what's happened in globalization and internet, have exploded in new types of ways to do business, and the entrepreneurial skills that are needed to constantly pivot and change and adapt and adjust, that requires that adaptability that kids. So when we have conformist, this is my concern, and I do write about this, what happens when we have the straight A children who are generalists across many subjects? They don't have time to focus on one that's their passion. They get good at doing this thing. They fit into systems. What do we do when corporations are changing their very structure? Those conformists can't climb the corporate ladder or the institutional ladder because those institutions are crumbling. You know, you had somebody on your show, by the way, your show, everybody, please watch her show at 9 a.m. on Pacific time, 12 o'clock on her Classroom Without Walls, because she has guests. I learn, I join every moment I can, but they were just talking about the fact that 52% of the businesses, companies that were in existence in 2000 are gone already, extinct. We are swirling so fast. I mean, you're going from having a large circuit city that employed 200,000 to Facebook that has, you know, a few thousand. And these are the ones that are driving our economy today. It's
100%,
the little pods, and we're not preparing our children for
no, not at all. They need to, yeah, 100%, you know, gig economy, freelancing. And so when Elaine Pofield came to my show, she discussed this trend, $1 million business. And that is a big trend. Students need to understand, even if they don't want to become entrepreneur, at least they need to know what is actually happening, so they can actually learn to diversify their skills and to think about ways that they can diversify their income. But yeah, as Pam mentioned, the number of permanent workers is like sharply decreasing. And now with COVID, I think we all have a taste of it. And so yeah, like, you know, that multiple streams of income, gig economy, freelancing economy, I think that is pretty much the reality that by the time that our students graduate, they need to like understand. A few days ago, there's this a student recently graduated from Florida State University. She posted on LinkedIn, I don't know if you saw it, and got so much traction. And so she has two majors. One is international affairs, another one is marketing, but she couldn't find jobs, of course, with COVID, but I think there is also a bigger issue. So she eventually found a job, which is at Target, and her post is like, I'm working at Target, but I'm not in the marketing department or international affairs. She was like boxing and cleaning shelves, doing the basics. And then, you know, like, what a joke, right? Think about how much time and how much money her parents investing in this, like 2 degrees and a 4-year education from pretty good school. And yeah, exactly.
I'm getting calls like that. I got a call just 2 days ago from a parent whose son graduated, entrepreneurial degree, did everything right, had all the internships. You know, again, it was like checking the box. He did everything right. He has no job. And he doesn't know how, you know, my last blog was about getting a job, creating a job, or having an asset that you can join the sharing economy and make money that way.
Amen.
And
Amen.
In and out of all their lives in the future is going to be these different sources of income, but you can't rely on getting a job. You have
exactly. Like, they need to learn to create a job, you know, design thinking. Like, can you design a job? Can you create one based on how good you are, the skills you have? That is something I'm trying to work with Rachel to help her. You have this unique skill set. Can you actually create something based on how good you are? Just like how I built this based on what I'm passionate about, based on what I'm good at. So students need to understand, instead of always passively looking for a job, but hey, can you actually create one? And I think they all should take a gap year. Don't wait until you graduate from high school or until you graduate from college and then start looking for jobs. And I think the best time to start is now. You need to validate your skills. You need to validate your idea. And the best way to validate is actually put yourself out there, launching a podcast, sharing your ideas to see like which idea people will actually resonate with you and will they actually pay you. You know, I use a model with my student, which is Ikigai or Ikigai, the Japanese concept.
Yes,
love it.
Oh gosh, Ziz is all over that.
Exactly. So one is like, you are so passionate about this, but also you have to be good at this. And a big missing piece is that, are people going to pay for you to do this? So that is really important. You need that market validation. And yeah.
I think we ought to make gap year obsolete, because we're doing what you're talking about in high school, and kids are doing half-time in learning school and in the environment in high school, so that the gap year becomes obsolete and college becomes an if and when proposition, because now 40% of college undergraduates are over the age of 25. You don't have to go to college when you're 18. You can go at any time. Hey, Ziz, do you want to share about your son and some of the things that he's doing with this?
But you know, before I do that though, so here's what's really interesting, because another term that we can introduce to everyone is MVP, minimal viable product. And then, so what's interesting to me is they use Snapchat, they use Instagram. They don't understand the concepts of marketing a product. So say if it was your daughter, Rachel, who sews a product, which one is it?
It's Alice. It's Allie.
Allison.
Yeah.
Or, you know, so if Allison created something and she put it on the market on Instagram, hey, and did a survey, how many people would be interested in this product? So all of a sudden, if it breaks the internet, so to speak, she's like, oh, I might be onto something. That's a way to test the market.
Yes.
And the internet is the difference maker.
Exactly.
It's the difference maker. So my son, you know, who graduated from Cornell University, fortunately, he was in their hotel school. So they have requirements before you graduate that you have to complete so many hours outside in an actual job. So in his particular case, he was fortunate enough to do an internship at Morgan Stanley. He gets hired by them. But while at Cornell, he wanted to share more about his experience as a student of color. So he's mixed race, and he started talking about that. He called it Ivy Untold. So it's stories about minorities. That's not a term I really like anymore. I'm gonna say it's a story about people sharing their unique stories so other people could get a different perspective. So I might whisper in his ear and say, hey dude, the majority is not important anymore. No. But that's another story. But at any point, he started that, it gained traction. When he graduated, he goes to Morgan Stanley, he's in their 2-year management program, and he started noticing that artists needed some help from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So he came up with a way to get their art, put it on a t-shirt, put it on a shirt and other products, and he started selling it. And of course, the artists were happy because that's not their skill set. They really want to create art. So he's essentially the middle bridge between all of that. So he had his best month last month. He's also having another good month. It's been awesome for me as a dad to see that he's able to, you know, it's not just about learning in a classroom, it's beyond the classroom, way beyond the classroom. And that's what's important for me. And that's what we're talking about here. And that's what we want for students, because if the students, I mean, you think about students, they have unique ways of solving problems. Because right now we're not doing such a good job. Our generation needs some help. And I want to hear more from them, because they probably have a different concept of how to come up with solving some of these problems. But also we empower them. That's really what we're talking about, is empowering them. And
helping less.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like one thing, you know, I'm like just kind of to follow up on this discussion. One thing I noticed, at least for my class, is the last several years, students are asking for like rubric, template. It's getting longer and longer. It's like, wow, the only thing you need to do is fill in the blank, because they're so afraid of losing a point. They're so afraid of making a mistake. And it's not really helping them to develop those critical problem solving skills. When you see a problem, you actually see an opportunity. What can I do to solve this problem to generate income and impact for myself? Exactly. They are so used to, when they see a problem, what is the template that I can use to solve
the formula? Because we teach them that. We teach them that there's an answer, that there's a fixed finite bubble. And the thing is the critical, you know, these made up critical thinking problems, right? No, when you care about something, so we need to teach children to see, to look, to constantly be looking for opportunities and things that matter to them. This is the discovery of meaning. This is, wow, I see an opportunity. Ziz, your son was, exactly, I have this skill set. He doesn't have to be a creative person. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm involved in film, but it's hilarious because I bring my what my little piece to the table is, and this person brings theirs, and we respect and collaborate. And here we're just like Kara. We have our Kara, who is the technological person who put the website together. And, you know, the minute Ziz called me and said, "Let's do a podcast," by that Monday, we were rolling with the website. And because it's what she loves to do, learn by herself, by the way, because of course that wasn't taught all those years ago. She's a mom of 3 kids. So, but we each brought something to the table.
So imagine this. So you think about a company like Netflix. Netflix like, hey, let's go to Blockbuster. Hey, Blockbuster, we have this great idea. Blockbuster's like, no, you don't. So that reminds me of when, you know, we mentioned quite a few times that there's a criteria that people establish. And it's like, okay, who's to say that that is the actual criteria? Imagine if Blockbuster had actually listened to Netflix. It's a good thing they didn't, because now Blockbuster is gone and Netflix is the platform we're using, and things are always evolving. So that's really, it's dynamic. Learning is dynamic. It's always evolving. I'm learning so much here. I'm trying to take notes and I'm like, oh, I got to read this article. It's exciting because that's how you learn. I love it. You know, I take it back to yoga. I teach yoga. So this morning when I taught my class, I looked at my students. I had a script in my mind as to like what I was going to do. And I was like, okay, I'm going to shift it because I noticed my students needed a bit more stretching. So you adapt to what the need is, which means listen more, right? That's what we're talking about.
Totally, totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I read a futurist once, and they were giving advice to parents, and you know, the interviewer was saying, well, what is the one piece of advice you would give to parents? And they said, embrace uncertainty. We keep teaching our kids that the world is certain, and it is not. It is uncertain. So to prepare them for the uncertainty, you know, and instead we prepare them for happiness, right? We want them to be happy. It is not a goal. You need a reason to be happy. This is a byproduct of doing something you care about, or being with someone you care about, or something that relates to this, not as a goal in and of itself. It's an emotion that is not sustainable, right? And yet this is the goal of most people. Most parents, for their child, is just to be happy. No, you want them to be, and this is Viktor Frankl who used to say it's a byproduct, but not only that, the goal is to teach people to deal with life, to deal with all the good, bad, ugly, messy, whatever of life. That is the goal for our children, is to be able to embrace uncertainty, overcome fear, be outside of themselves, and really live in an uncertain world, knowing that there's lots of us. Build your tribe, get the support, and away we go. So we got to get into our communities as opposed to into our, you know, get out of our silos into our community.
So speaking of support, Dr. I, why don't you have a shirt on that some people may not be actually visually looking at this, they might be listening. So tell us where we can find you, what platform you're hanging out mostly on, and the best ways to follow your content. And maybe tell us a bit about your future guest that's going to be tomorrow. Well, that's going to be on a Friday, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So my website is a classroom without walls .ai. My name .ai. So people can go to my website to learn a little bit more about me and all the interviews I did. Most of them are on my website. And they can also check me out on social media. Nowadays, I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. Just my name, AI Addyson-Zhang. And for my show tomorrow and Friday, I'm actually interviewing one of my friends, and he is an introvert. So he's going to share his journey, his learning, and his reflection as an introvert to navigate in a very extroverted society. And the funny part is now he is a public speaking coach. And I thought that was really interesting from being, and also a trained actor. And so really interesting, and to learn more about his journey and how he's navigating everything. So and so I have two shows. One is on every Wednesday, and that one focuses on social media marketing, entrepreneurship. So for people who are interested in growing their business and launching a business, learning more about marketing. So that is on Wednesday, and the show on Friday is more on education. We discuss, debate, and disrupt education.
Great.
So well, I was just going to have her tell the story of Seth Godin.
Yeah, the Seth Godin.
Inspirational to this, and we'll end with that one. But it's such a great story.
Yeah, so I interviewed Seth Godin for my marketing show. He said, if you are so passionate about education, why don't you launch one for education? And we were talking about, he's really into education. I love his content. And he said, what is school for? I said, yeah, that's going to be the title for my podcast. What is school for? So we discuss, debate, and disrupt education with the intention to future-proof the next generation.
And not be fearful. He said,
Yes.
what were your failure? She
Yeah.
had said, well, how do I do this and not make mistakes?
Yeah, he said that the reason you are asking that question, because I was asking for, a rubric, right? Is there a rubric, a roadmap, a template, whatever I can follow to do this? It's like, the reason you are asking this question is because you are afraid of making mistakes. But the only way for you to figure it out is actually to make a mistake. So, wow, so profound. Yeah, so it inspired me so much. Yeah.
Yeah, we loved having you on the show.
I could talk
Thank
about
you
this
so much for coming.
Yeah, I'm really honored. I love talking about this, and especially with two amazing friends. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, again, thank you. This is a conversation about what it means to be educated in the 21st century. So thank you, Dr. Ai, for joining Pam and I on Queued Up with Ziz and Pam.
I loved it. Yeah, of course. Yeah.